Welcome to the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast, where we explore the spirituality of the Christian child through the method of the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. I'm your host, Carrie Mecki-Lozano, with my dear friend Anna Hurdle as my co-host. Today, we welcome back Cathy Johanni as our guest on the podcast, and we have a really great conversation diving into the psychological characteristics of the second plane child. Now, the psychological characteristics are imagination, reason, group work, mental strength, and moral development. And so Cathy kind of explains what each of these things are from the Montessori perspective, but then also how these look in our environments of the CGS Atria. Cathy lives in Columbus, Ohio, where she has enjoyed accompanying children on their spiritual journey for more than 2 decades. She is a recognized formation leader in Catechesis of the Good Shepherd in levels 1, 2, and 3, and she has been involved in Montessori education for over a decade, working with children aged 5 to 14. She has been a part of our editorial committee for our annual journal and also written many articles for us. She has a bachelor's degree in anthropology, a master's degree from The Ohio State University, and a Montessori elementary certificate. At the end of our conversation today, Anna and I recorded us answering another listener question. So after our conversation with Cathy, you'll get to listen into us responding to one of your amazing questions. If you would like to submit a question, we have a link in our show notes for that purpose. I hope you enjoy. Cathy, welcome to the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, welcome back. We're so pleased you could join us again.
Hi, Anna. I'm happy that I can join you too. I'm really excited about this topic for today.
Me too.
Well, let's just dive right in. Today, Cathy is joining us to discuss the psychological characteristics of the child in the second plane. And that's a little bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, let's break this down.
We need to break that down a bit. But we're returning to our Montessori roots once again when it comes to child development and pedagogy as we continue to ponder that question. Who is this child? Who is this child, particularly in the second plane? So along with looking at the planes of development, which we have done often, or many of you have, and the human tendencies, the universal human tendencies, another element of the Montessori approach is the psychological characteristics. And even though it's a different facet of the child's development or human development, it is also connected to both the human tendencies and the child within a specific plane. Mm-hmm. So, why do we spend so much time on this? Why are we studying more about this, learning more about this? When we're talking about the child in the second plane, we are focusing on what can help us to facilitate the progressive evolution of the child from an individual. So think about the child in 3 to 6, or the child of the first plane, who is an individual. And now we are moving with the second plane to an individual within a society. Mm-hmm. So a little bit of an introduction there.
Yeah. What you said is so important, Anna. Like in the beginning of our courses, one of the first reflections we do is, who is this child? And maybe it's just so much a part of our work, we have forgotten that this is a really radical approach to design our method around an understanding of the child, because a lot of times a curriculum, quote unquote, is designed with an end in mind, and then it trickles down. But this is really a different way of looking. And we often say in our formation courses, what is the face of God that the child at this age needs to see? And that answer really is related to these psychological characteristics that you're talking about. So,
And we talk about that meeting of the two mysteries, right? The mystery of God meets the mystery of the child. And we can't fully do that if we don't explore who the child is. And I think when we move from the first plane child at 0 to 6-year-old, the second plane child is a completely different person, a complete, like Montessori compares it to the caterpillar, right? So like the egg to the caterpillar, it's a completely different characteristics happening there. So I think it's super helpful for us to look at who the child is, especially through this lens of the psychological characteristics, because I don't think we talk about this enough. So I'm really excited to figure out with you guys, what are these psychological characteristics that Marie Montessori lifted up for us to help us understand who this 6 to 12-year-old is.
Yeah, indeed. In creative development in the child, Dr. Montessori said, we must revise the learning environments and approaches for these new and different children. That's your point, Carrie, right? They're very different. Our methods should correspond to these different stages of the child's life, finding a different environment, a different way of dealing with him, the child, in each stage. So really zeroing in on what the child's capacities are and what the child's needs are, and then how do we support their spiritual growth, knowing that, working with those characteristics rather than filling up an empty vessel, which we don't believe that children are empty. Yeah.
Right. It's like moving with the tide instead of against it by understanding who they are.
It's a great analogy.
Well, Cathy, could you begin by maybe sharing with us, listing the characteristics?
Yeah. So in the elementary child, ages 6 to 12, we see a great capacity for imagination. We see intellectual abilities that we would call the ability to reason. There is a pull towards group work. They are very socially sensitive and drawn towards their peers. And they are capable of what we would call great work through mental strength. They like to do big things, and it's really their mind that is inspiring this big work. And then, of course, the moral development. They're at a morally sensitive period, so this is the time when they're really asking those questions. So those are maybe a summary of the things that we find in this age child.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. Let's dive into each one. Like, what do each of these psychological characteristics, what does it really mean? And through the lens, though, of how does this help us specifically in the atrium? How does this help us with the religious development of children? So, like with imagination, what is imagination? How does that different from what we look at with the first plane child when we think about imagination?
Yeah, that's great. So Dr. Montessori says imagination is the great power of this age. Imagination does not become great until man, given the courage and strength, uses it to create. And so maybe we should define imagination a little bit, because we're not saying that the younger child is completely devoid of imagination, right? Montessori also said imagination is a force for the discovery of truth. And so the level 1 child, up to age 6, they are using a type of imagination, but it's really directed towards discovering the truth in the young child's environment. So it's oriented towards the reality that's being experienced by this child who's in this, everything seems new, right? But all those experiences that the child has will become the raw data that they can use when they want to imagine things, especially in the second plane of development. So if you look at a young child, their imaginative play is going to be probably imitating. They're going to be imitating what they're observing and characterizing and categorizing that in what they see in the home, for example. They might pretend to be cooking just like they see a parent cooking, or they might pretend to be cleaning if they see the parent cleaning, or even imitating like the tone and the rise and fall in speech patterns, right? So that's what we would see sort of in a younger child. But in the second plane, they have a very different capacity for imagination because they are able to abstract from these realistic experiences that they absorbed in that first plane. Then they can kind of visualize and understand a range of possibilities. So they don't have to just imitate, but they can create in their mind things that could happen or explanations of why something could be. So this type of imagination is less imitation and more like an intellectual tool. Just like a scientist would need the intellectual tool of imagining what could happen when he does an experiment, or a historian would want to imagine different reasons for an event she's studying or something like that. So really that gets back to this idea of imagination as a force for the discovery of truth. The second plane child has the capacity to abstract, and so they are trying to discover truths even outside of their own environment. Mm-hmm. Does that sort of?
Yeah. No, it does. Because like the first plane child, their imagination is limited to almost to what they can see in front of them, what's in their everyday life. And their imaginative play is based on reality to help them process what it is that they're experiencing, what it is that they're seeing. But the second plane child is able to see imaginatively, abstractly beyond what is right in front of them. So like you said, they're able to think historically, like what happened in another culture, what happened another time that they've never actually seen before.
Absolutely.
So I want to clarify, though, what is the difference between imagination and fantasy?
Oh, good one, Carrie.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say imagination is tethered to reality. Like it's a creative twist on reality. In contrast to fantasy, which could be an escape from reality. It might be a very entertaining story or entertaining account that you're imagining, but it's not something that compels one to further discovery. And remember, Montessori says imagination is a force for the discovery of truth. So fantasy would be more of a diversion, where imagination would be inspiring more and more intellectual work, more and more wonder, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, how would we in the atrium, in this level 2 and level 3 atrium, how would you suggest that we could foster and nurture the child's imagination to help be an aid in their spiritual and religious growth?
Yeah, what a great question. One of the things that I really so admire about Maria Montessori is that she developed all these theories and understanding about how the brain works within the child, but she did it without the benefit of like brain imaging techniques that we have today.
Yeah.
And then modern neuroscience using those techniques that were not available to her. It seems to me that modern neuroscience is continually uncovering evidence that supports what she found just through observation. So modern neuroscience would say to support the development of creativity and the imagination, we have to know that imagination involves the memory hub of the brain. So if you want to foster the child's imagination, you have to give them rich experiences, real experiences that they can store in their memory. Then it would say besides the memory hub, it also, creativity and imagination actually involves the sensorial centers of the brain. So like if you're imagining the wind rustling the leaves, it activates a faint echo in your mind of what your senses experienced when you were outside and the wind came and blew through the trees.
I think it's amazing. I'm thinking about like EMDR therapy and stuff, and how like our imagination, we remember things that have happened in our life, and it causes sensorial and emotional reactions in our brain.
Yeah.
When we use our imagination to remember memories, triggers, stressful or painful things that have happened. And those memories are wrapped with those emotions, right? And so, oh God, our brains are amazing. And also what's fascinating about what you just said is how amazing Maria Montessori is. I don't know if, I'm sure both of y'all have read the book, Maria Montessori, The Science Behind the Genius. And it's today's science that's proving what Maria Montessori said 100 years ago. And the fact that she did it without these brain scans, she did it without all of the technology that we have today. She did it thoroughly through observation, just shows just how amazing this woman was.
Right.
Yes, she was really amazing. She also discovered that, in the second plane, the child seems to be hardwired for social interaction. And we know that that's true at every age, but in particular in the second plane, there's a particular character to that social interaction. And also brain imaging studies are showing that, right? And so I think that to stoke imagination, it's helpful to have other humans around because fellowship kind of matters. And so the neuroscience today also says that imagination and creativity depends on something that they call the default mode network, which comes on when you're resting or you're daydreaming, which is to say when you're not being hurried, when you're not being rushed, when you're not being pushed to be productive, but when you have some degree of leisure, perhaps. And then just with all of those things, the experiences in the memory hub, the sensorial center, the social interaction, and this sort of default mode, this ability to slow down, I think of our atrium, right? Like our atrium experience provides for all of these things. So it's a natural fit, a natural match to the child's imagination. We have the opportunity to repeat things so that memory is activated. We have sensorial work. We have a supportive social interaction there in our little community. And then we have time to engage in activity and then restful activities that are really refreshing and not draining. So I think those would be the things that we do to foster and nurture a child's imagination and creativity, just kind of following this Montessori model.
And listening to you speak just now, Cathy, I'm struck by how our culture does not give the time and space for some of these experiences.
It's a shame, isn't it?
We see a child taking some downtime, and our natural reaction might be, can I help you find something to do? Get to work.
Right.
Which I wonder if that's somehow rooted in our own insecurities of leisure. Like that starts with us as the adult being at peace with the value of me taking leisure, of me taking a pause, of me resting, And so when we see someone else doing it, it causes, a reaction in us because we are insecure about that.
I think you both raised really good points that this is in some way countercultural. That really, Montessori always asked her teachers to self-reflect, right? The preparation of the adult is so important. And how much have we adults absorbed the culture, right? How much do we judge ourselves by what the amount of things on our to-do list that we've checked off in a day, right? So this is why our catechist formation has to be retreat-like, and it has to take such a long time because we're really fighting against a lot of currents in our world today, and we're trying to, the child is helping us to remake ourselves in some way. So
true.
And then when we do that, the children by their work, they show us the validity of allowing for their imagination. I'm thinking of some level 3 children who used their imagination to make up songs and to write them down on poster board so that the whole group could learn them. Or I had a group of 9-year-old girls last year, and I would bring in just random things that would end up at my house, a bit of ribbon or something from the top of a package that arrived, and I would just wait to see how they used it, and it would end up on a big poster about like following the maxims, and somehow they would find it and tie it in I had a level 3 girl last year who decided she was going to make a 3D nativity, and she was only going to use scraps from our scrap bin. She limited herself that way, but wow, it was so creative and so much thought and time went into it. And at one point, maybe this is what you were saying, Carrie, she ran out of scraps in the particular color, and I suggested, well, why don't we just cut up a piece of, no, that would violate this whole thing. So I was trying to hurry her along maybe, or something, I don't know. And she held fast to, no, the whole point is that I'm only using scraps for this. It was the humility of it, I even remember we had flower arranging in our atrium, and I had some children who, you take the leaves off so that the leaves don't get all moldy, and I had children who took the leaves from the discard and live leaves and taped them onto a poster about the true vine. But if I had hurried them, would they have had the chance to be creative with the raw materials, the simple raw materials that are just there in the atrium? So
this conversation is sparking a memory with me in ways to nurture the relationship with God when Sophia's talking about John 15, the parable of the true vine, and we just mentioned the true vine that might have helped spark it. How many times are we asked to remain or abide, to stay, according to which translation you read? It's I don't know, 11 or so. And then how many times are we asked to bear fruit? And we're asked to bear fruit 5 or 6 times. And so we are told to remain, to stay, to be twice as many times as we're told to do.
Yeah.
Well, what about reasoning? What about reasoning ability?
Yeah, that is so strong in the child. In the second plane, we call this the age of reason, right? And Dr. Montessori says that a child is not satisfied with a mere collection of facts. He tries to discover their causes. So really, this is the most intellectual time for the child, just to be able to absorb so many facts and just continuing to categorize. We say that sometimes the children at this age are messy because they're not doing an external order, but an internal intellectual order is where their energies are directed. So one of the ways that we nurture that in the atrium is we often begin our presentations with a question or a linking point, because boy, that sucks them in right away. One of my favorites is in the memorial. We often start our presentation by saying, oh, there are all these wonderful moments of salvation history, but they all happened before I was born. Was I perhaps born too late? And I just love watching the children, because they're filled with compassion for you. No, you weren't born too late. But right away, they're
don't feel bad.
How am I going to convince her that she wasn't born too late? And I just love that, that then they're looking for, oh, no, you weren't born too late, Miss Cathy. And then they're looking to try and find an argument, of reasonable, logical argument to show that. Or when we do the maxims in the cosmos, we'll say, is it only the sun and the moon that follows God's commands? And so just really piquing their interest with a question. I know sometimes when we begin the typology presentations with the children, we ask, we say that these first chapters of the Bible were not eyewitness accounts, but they were the fruit of reflection of the Hebrew people who were asking deep philosophical questions. For example, if God made the world good, why is there so much in the world that's not good? And then I always say, and you too may have that question. And again, that's pulling in the reasoning mind. And I will never forget, I had a little 5th grade girl who said to me once, I know when I grow up what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a philosopher. I thought that was so great. I've never heard a child want to be a philosopher.
I love that.
Isn't it great? Like, I'll never forget her for saying that. I thought, this is such a victory. You want to be a philosopher? You want to keep asking questions your whole life? That's great. I can't wait to hear it. So I think that's a really important point, you know?
I love how you lifted up how the point is to pique their curiosity. Mm-hmm. I think that, again, I think this is that shift in us as the adults, as the catechist, as the parent, from a first plane to a second plane child, is we want to make sure that we're leaving them with this feeling of more. There's more that they can discover. There's more that they can wonder about. There's more that they can go learn. But if I sit here as the adult with all the love in my heart, give them everything, I've put a period at the end of that, and then there's nothing left for them to do. So I think it's very helpful I love that you pointed that out, that we're piquing their curiosity. The presentations are to pique their curiosity, and then their work is where it gets really deep and meaty, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, we often say that our presentations are a springboard, but we can't jump for the child, right, off that springboard.
Right.
So, how do we inspire that? Part of it is with follow-up work. We're not assigning the follow-up, but we're having a conversation with them. Like, we expect good work, but we don't necessarily define what that needs to be for every child. So a conversation, well, what could you do to think about this more? And I don't know about you two, but I always find that they come up with more creative and more difficult assignments for themselves than anything I would have thought possible.
Right. And we do them when we talk about big work, hard work. We do them a disservice when we try to give them tasks that are beneath them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I like that you pointed out that they do work that tends to be more difficult or more challenging than we would have given them. And Anna, I feel like you said this before, that sometimes we as the adults, we might try and bring them back down.
Yes.
And it's important for us to create an environment that supports these ideas and maybe ask some curiosity questions of, okay, well, have y'all thought of this? Have you thought of that? Rather than kind of diminish their ideas.
An example from the Montessori classroom might be helpful to think about that. When a child is practicing, say, multiplication, and they come up to you with their copybook and ask for some multiplication problems. Well, first of all, sometimes they make up their own problems to begin with, but say they ask you to make up a problem for them. And our natural inclination might be to say 125 times 25. Okay. And if you hand them that, they will give you this look like, really? So let's see, what kind of problem would we like today? So we, could you make the multiplican the entire width of the page? Gosh, let me see. I don't know. Can I? That's a lot of numbers. Why don't you help me? And they will spend an hour. And it takes the same practice that doing one problem with a, multi-digit multiplican and multiplier than it would to do 20 simple problems. And They're getting the same practice in. But the easy ones aren't feeding them. They're not feeding that that need for hard work.
Yeah. For them to know they're capable of great work, and
great
to prove
work.
it to everyone. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about a level 3 group that wanted to put on a prayer service in the church and include and invite the greater community and their parents and everything. And as the catechist, your immediate thought is, okay, this is a big project. This is a lot of work. And your first instinct is to bring it back down of like, okay, well, what if we just, did it in here with our group? You're thinking of, okay, now I got to get the receptionist involved. Can we even book the space? And I need to get father's permission. Like you as the adult think of all these details, and it makes you have that instinct to make their idea smaller. But if you instead invite the child to think about those complexities, not to bring it down. Yeah, but to empower them to maybe take a role in going to talk to Father and take a role in going and booking the church. Yeah. How are we going to invite the greater community? What do we need to do to, so yeah, I think just pointing that out, that we have that instinct as adults to bring it back to a more manageable level, but to instead empower them, like you said, Cathy, like you are capable of this. You are capable of this. I might think of all the details that you're not thinking of, so I'm going to ask some questions to help guide you in that, but you're capable. Yeah.
Another time might be with follow-up work. Like if the catechist says, your work is to copy one of the maxims. Everybody copy one of the maxims. And most likely people will be compliant and do it.
You might choose the shortest one.
Yeah. I'm thinking of my child self would have been like, I'm no longer interested in copying a maxim.
Right.
I was thinking about copying a maxim, but I'm no longer interested in copying a maxim.
Now that you told me to do it,
right.
It took away my joy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, what about group learner? This is a huge difference between a first plane child and a second plane child. You have group learners that you can't even hold back from being social from the 6 to 12-year-old.
Yeah. And maybe it's helpful to talk about group work versus parallel work. Group work is when there's a shared vision for a project, and then there's a division of labor in that project. Like you'll draw this, you'll copy this, you'll write this, you'll paste it all together, whatever. Parallel work, which is still social, that we sometimes see in level 2, but is more characteristic of level 1, could be where one person sits next to another and they're engaged in independent projects, but they're just enjoying spiritual companionship of each other, but they're not necessarily sharing the same goals in terms of the work. They're not actually constructing something together. And we see both of them, but maybe to different extents depending on the children here. I'm thinking of some 10-year-old girls who asked if they could start their time in the atrium praying a rosary together. And that was their idea. And they did it for about 5 weeks in a row. And then they moved on to something else. And I just found that interesting that it had its own arc to it. But I would say that was really group work, because one person brought in a book of reflections from home. They took turns leading it, but they had a shared vision of what it would be. It just really met the needs of these girls to experience community in prayer. And I didn't participate, but I observed. And afterwards, I just said, I wonder what that was like for you. And honestly, I was really curious. And wow, their response was just so tender. Like the girls reflected on how much they enjoyed praying together as a group of friends. I mean, they really, really spoke about that. And they said how it helped them to concentrate and to enjoy it more. And they go to a Catholic school, so they have prayed the rosary together before as part of their class, as part of their school. They've done that many times. But what was different here was that it was their own idea, their own enjoyment, their own division of labor, their own pace, and their own group. And I think that was just it was so eye-opening to me, the sense of enjoyment that they had out of that, which is really, really beautiful.
A common thing that I hear level 2 and level 3 catechists say is, how do I make their group work that, again, you're not stopping them from doing it. They're just so drawn towards that social. Most of them are. Okay, so how do I make their group work, quote unquote, productive? Like, how do I keep it from being play? How do I keep it from being unproductive in the traditional sense?
Yeah, and that's a big thing, and I'm sure Anna has a lot of techniques that she can share with us. But I think you can certainly have conversations, grace and courtesy conversations as a community about that and about what the time in the atrium is for. And the children at this age, again, with the reasoning mind, are able to see the purpose for the time in the atrium and what makes it rich for them. So I think that that's an important inspiration to this, an important way to help the children not to just be talking about their plans for the weekend or whatever and sitting next to each other and, drawing a picture of the Paschal candle. But I also think that if we do a really good job of making our presentations, which are pretty amazing if you think about it, if we can do those, if we ourselves have this sense of wonder, if we ourselves marvel at the Fatutia or the plan of God or the history of the gifts, if it's touched us deeply, then somehow that is going to be communicated to the children. The children will see in us that sincerity of heart and that wonder and humility before the greatness of God. And I think that will be inspiring, partially because that they are so socially sensitive and they see us and they're like, wow, what is this? I'm not saying that we are overly dramatic or the power of our personality is calling them in, but that our personality is showing the truth and the beauty of what it is that we're presenting them with, which is scripture and liturgy. So maybe our humility that lets that shine through, lets them know how awesome it is. And maybe we think about when we were in formation and we first saw the Fatutia and what impact that had on us. And if we bring a little bit of that sense of wonder and awe to what we do, I do think sometimes catechists have a fear of those big lessons, right? The Fatutia or the plan of God or something like that. They feel like they have to know everything and they have to be able to, to discourse on every aspect of the development of the universe. And so I do think catechists sometimes have fear on that. And that fear has been on my heart a lot recently, thinking about how do we empower catechists? We have to help them not to fear. And the great news is children at this age can fill in the gaps. If you say, I don't know something, boy, oh boy, they do.
Well, it goes back to what you were saying about leaving them with curiosity, right? Like,
Yes.
It's okay if you don't know it all.
Yeah. So just to be that springboard rather than a complete lecture on anything, right? Yeah.
Right.
I think that's really important. Yeah, and I also think it's helpful in terms of inspiring good work for the catechist to be able to work with small groups of children, and if possible to mix up the ages. That's the beauty of our atrium, right? But so that some can feel like they're followers and some can feel like they're leaders, and just giving the opportunity for that to be sliding categories. That's really, really helpful, I think. Yeah, and that guiding the process, encouraging that you were talking about, Carrie, just being curious about, well, what are some of the details and how could you address these?
What would that look like? What would we need to make that happen? So kind of helping, they have the big idea, but helping them break it down into smaller, manageable steps. And also, Cathy, what you said about making sure we take advantage of our multi-age groups in both the level 2 and the level 3 atria. We want to, if we're always saying, this is a presentation for the third years, this is a presentation for the first years. And not that there aren't some presentations that are more designed for the older child, and some that are more orientations to work to come. So it's not a blanket statement. But as the children get older, much of the work that we do in the atrium is the children get leveled out as far as their reading ability and that sort of thing. If you think about level 1, the 6-year-old is twice as old as the 3-year-old. And so the the age differences are less obvious, if that makes sense.
Yes. I hadn't thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right, Anna.
So just making sure that we are taking advantage of a multi-age atrium. There's a reason for it. And that those older children who have been used to doing big work are bringing the younger ones into the group. Hey, can you do this part? Would you like to help us do some research? Would you like to help us do some drawing? Would you help us find the supplies? All sorts of things that really often, it's so beneficial for the older child to have that role. And then, of course, the younger child likes being brought into the fold.
Absolutely.
I feel like with so much of what y'all have been sharing, it sounds like the power of the second plane is in the questions.
Yes.
So there's no telling of anything. Even, the child, they're not working in a quote unquote productive way or whatever. You ask questions with them about what is the purpose of the atrium or whatever, or how you engage them in a material, or it's all in questions. It's curiosity questions sounds like the powerhouse tool for the second plane child.
And you can have a little sense of humor with the older children as well, because they love that. They love puns and that sort of thing. So,
can you give us an example, Anna?
Working hard or hardly working? With a wink,
Yes. We had done the Armor of Light, and I had asked all the children to write down either a maxim or a commandment that they were going to work on that week. And I saw a friend in the atrium who didn't appear to be engaged, and I asked if he had a chance to write down his, and he said, "Oh, yes." And I kind of looked at him, and I said, "Well, do you want to share it with me?" And he shared it with me, and it was, "Thou shalt not kill." And so I said, "Oh, I didn't know there was an assassin in the classroom, and I forgot my bulletproof vest." And it's exactly what you're talking about, that humor. And then we both kind of laughed at it, and then we talked a little bit more. But after that, we had this bond, and he also did better work. Do you know what I mean? He knew that I was interested in his work, and I knew what his capacity was, and that I knew that he was just writing that down, not taking it seriously. So after that, we would share jokes quite often, but there was much better work coming from him because he felt seen, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
And I let him know that I knew he was capable of more, but with humor. So there was no shame associated with it, right? We both could chuckle about that. So, yeah.
Great examples.
Yeah. And I think these are all coming back to one of those other characteristics we talked about, great work through mental strength, right? Those questions and the time and the support. In level 3, oftentimes we say, we start them on something. We say, "When you finish up this, come and get me and we'll talk about it." That independence right there makes them feel like they're capable of great work. I remember once I said, "I haven't had time to think this through, but I think there might be some really good connections between the virtues and the maxims." And I just said it like that. And one of the girls was like, "I got it." And she just spent time moving the things around. And then I was like, "Well, what would you like to do with this?" And she decided she wanted to leave a quote unquote legacy project. So she put together a little booklet that's probably still in the atrium now, that was questions to ask yourself about the maxims and the virtues. So, I think that's one thing we as adults can say, "Hey, I haven't had time to think this through, but I feel like there's some connections here." I know with the older children in the atrium, I said, "Do you want to leave a legacy? You're going to be aging out." And I had 2 children who were so certain that they had something that they wanted to contribute and leave on the shelves here for the next generation. They asked if they could spend, our atrium ended just before lunch, and they were like, we want to stay here for lunch. And I said, "Oh boy, you're going to have to go ask the principal. Let him know you're not in trouble, that you want to do this." And they came back, worked through their lunch. I said, "I've got another group coming in, and they said, we'll just sit in the back very quietly. So they did until they finished, because they had such a sense of, I have great work to give. This is going to be my legacy. And I was just so impressed with their dedication to their own gift, I guess is a way of putting it, you know?
That's neat. I've never heard of a legacy project. I love that.
We have something similar that has organically developed through the years. And we have just a collection of various examples of big work. And sometimes it's just a follow-up work where a child has made an example I'm thinking of is the linear liturgical calendar. And this particular child did the liturgical calendar on the front side for a particular year. I can't, she chose maybe the year she was born. And then on the back side, she made it All Saints. And so she put all the saints' days. And it was an ongoing project that took for, very long time. And then rolled it up and put it in the box where other people have left their work that they have done with one of the typologies and that sort of thing. And nobody ever copies it, but just pulling that box out and going through people's work, like, oh, we can do that.
And isn't that more inspiring for a child than an adult giving a suggestion?
Know.
Right. Right. Yes. That opportunity they have to see what other children their age are capable of and saying, I could do that.
And this is an example from a long time ago. We had this young man who had finished, he had worked and worked and worked on finishing his missal, his complete, level 3 missal. And I bound it for him and I went to give it to him and he said, Miss Anna, I think I'm just going to leave it here so that other children can be inspired to finish theirs. And I said, are you sure? This is one of the things that you can take home, and he said, I think I want to leave it here. So he did. And he left it on the shelf. And then he grew up and went off. And one day this man comes back in a dress Marine uniform. Marine's uniform. And he came to the door and gave me a hug. And I asked him if he wanted to come in. And he said, sure. So he came in and he said, do you still have my missal? Oh. And I pointed it out. I said, right there it is on the shelf. And I said,
oh my gosh.
Do you know how many children look at that and they think, oh, you can have messy handwriting. You can, it doesn't have to be perfect. And it's in a sense of perfection. It is perfect. But anyhow, that idea of having exemplars is one way to inspire work.
That's a great story. Yeah. I love that. Can you imagine what that did for this man to come back and see that his work was still there? Like, oh,
yeah.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. I think I read someplace that when the Bambinos came back to Sophia and Gianna, there was some celebration, maybe 50 years or something like that, that was their comment mostly, was that they felt seen and respected and that their contributions were valued, whether or not there were, that was what they really recalled so beautifully. And your story, Anna, illustrates that, like that he came back and saw, his work was valued. He was respected. His contribution was continuing to give life to other people. How beautiful that is.
I think the story you're referring to is found in Essential Realities. And I love that too, because, the ex-Bambini aren't saying, oh yes, Sophia and Gianna gave this lovely lesson on the Pearl of Great Price, or or specific details, but it's more of how they felt.
Mm-hmm.
And that is truly formational as how that person was formed and grew into who they came to be, as opposed to a lot of facts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we kind of covered great work through mental strength through talking about the other ones.
Yes.
But I wanted to, there's also the psychological characteristic of moral development. And I know that we've talked about that a lot in a bunch of the other podcasts. But if you would just touch on what that means and how that is applied in our work and how that can be an aid to us as catechists and as parents, I think that would be good to just tap on it a little bit in our conversation today.
Yeah, I agree. In The Absorbent Mind, Dr. Montessori says it is in the second period from 6 to 12 years old that the child begins to become conscious of right and wrong. This not only as regards to his own actions, but also the actions of others. Problems of right and wrong are characteristic of this age. Moral consciousness is being formed, and this leads later to the moral sense. And I think I often say that when adults walk into an atrium and they see all the materials, they are so excited by all the materials. But what I always say is it's the invisible aspects of the atrium that aren't sitting on the shelf that are really, really amazing. And I think this moral piece speaks to that, because really our atrium sessions, our atrium community is a laboratory for the practice of being a good Christian, of interacting in a way that lives the law of love, right? It's everything there in terms of how we care for each other, how we solve conflicts, how we care for the environment. It's all part of this moral development. And so I just think it's ironic, because what attracts adults to our work is usually the physical space, but it's this invisible aspect of it that to me is so compelling. Maybe because I get the opportunity to see it unfolding before my eyes, but certainly our grace and courtesy discussions, if we end our atrium sessions, sometimes before prayer, we gather together and we there could be an opportunity to share about what work we chose for that day. There could be an opportunity to say, how did we do? Did we live our freedom well? Did we have these expectations that we ourselves have set out for how the atrium would go? Did we meet our own expectations? And if not, what would be some solutions? How could we do this better next time? Are we choosing challenging work? Are we being kind to each other? Are we being connected to the Good Shepherd here? And if not, let's figure out what we can do to change it. Always with that, Father Mangillo, who helped Sophia and Gianna in terms of understanding moral development. He always said Christianity is all about you can, right? And so we're empowering the children. You can, if this wasn't what we wanted it to be, you can change that next time. And what can we do together so that together we're moving towards living the beautiful Christian community that we want it to be?
I love that idea of a collective examination.
I do too. They talk about that in positive discipline with the class meeting.
Yes.
I think it can be very powerful in the atrium as well.
Yes.
And I love also, again, you are leading with questions. You're not telling the children, well, today I saw y'all not really working very hard. You know what I mean? You are leading with these curiosity questions to help the children come to their own conclusions so they feel seen and respected within this space, right? And that's what they need at this plane.
Yep. Yeah, and oftentimes they are harsher critics of their own their own behavior in the atrium than the adults would be. So that's beautiful. Then we can support them in really becoming who they want to be as a community.
So much. We tapped on a lot of really great things in this conversation today.
We did. We did.
Who knew that psychological characteristics could be such a springboard for such wisdom?
Yeah, it's been lovely to share this conversation with the both of you.
Well, I really appreciate you, Cathy. I really appreciate you sharing your time with us, but just your wisdom. I just always so enjoy talking to you. Your love for the child always comes out so beautifully in the way that you speak. And so I just appreciate you and everything that makes you you.
Yes, I think that you're modeling, even when you're talking with us, the same
thank you.
Conversation that you have with your children and participants in your courses.
I hope so. I feel like any wisdom I have is really coming from the children.
Yes.
And I'm happy. I feel really blessed to be learning from them on a regular basis. So,
well, thank you, Cathy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Anna. It's been a real blessing.
Okay, Anna, so our listener question for today, I actually have two questions that are very similar. So I'm going to read both of them to you and then we can explore them together. Okay, so I have one that says, we have a relatively new CGS program and frequently get students who want to join CGS with no level 1 and level 2 background who are 8, 9, and 10 years old. I'd love some ideas on scaffolding these new children into level 2 and level 3. Is it ever necessary to offer the lower level presentations? Will they get a strong foundation without these presentations? And a very similar question to that one, how can we best help children integrate into the atrium when they begin CGS later without having gone through level 1? In my parish, I have a number of children who are beginning in level 2 around 2nd grade because of sacrament preparation. They don't have the level 1 foundation. I want to serve them well while honoring the program. How can I guide them so they can enter into the work of the atrium in a meaningful way, even though they've missed the earlier formation? So what would you say to that, Anna?
I would say I'm remembering that there's a quote off the top of my head, I can't remember which book, where Maria Montessori says, a half a loaf of bread is better than no bread at all. And I've used that several times in my own mind, for my own self as I've thought about certain situations through the years.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. I think, we're in the business of planting seeds and we have to trust God and the Holy Spirit in everybody's journey.
Right.
Okay, so you have an 8, 9, 10-year-old, a 7-year-old that's coming in their 2nd grade year who never has been in the atrium before. What do you do? Do you go back to level 1 presentations?
I think there's a distinction here between a fully established atrium that has a few 7, 8-year-olds coming in, as opposed to an atrium with an influx of older children coming in. So when it is a few children, in our situation, that happens quite a bit with people moving and our transient society and work culture and that sort of thing. We have that happening quite a bit. And I think when it's just a few children, or even just one, that child is easily integrated into the life of the atrium through the children.
Without much special attention from the adult.
Because the children do it. But if we're talking about a whole lot of children that have come to the space, I would refer back to something that we talk about in our level 2 courses, and to a degree our level 3 courses for our people who are catechists, who are already second plane catechist, how level 1 materials live in the level 2 atrium. And we often discuss that there are so many materials that overlap both atria. So all of the infancy narratives, all of the kingdom parables, the geography, the Good Shepherd. So there's so many of the same presentations and even same materials. So what has changed The materials are the same, but what has changed? The child has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we can kind of go back to those most fundamental presentations, but not treating the children like they're 3. That's the distinction.
So do I hear you correctly in saying that you would give the Good Shepherd presentation, the level 1 Good Shepherd presentation to this 8, 9, 10-year-old, but maybe your wondering questions are a little bit more open. You're not touching the materials, right? Because, you just don't do that with the second plane child.
So I think if we just want to kind of encapsulate this whole idea of we want to still give that older child, a falling in love experience.
Yes. Even though they're older,
they still need to fall in love first before they respond, before they make those responses. Because if we look back to some of Sophia's writing, and she talks about when traditionally children were withheld from formation until they were in the age of reason, and why we don't do that. And so we can't control it when we get them in the age of reason. But at the same time, we can still let them have a falling in love experience before they start looking at what is my response? What am I to do? That sort of thing.
So what that actually looks like is, yes, you would give those level 1 presentations that live in the level 2 and level 3 atrium to those children, just done differently because they are now a second plane child.
Right. So if we spoke very slowly with long periods of silence and very intentionally, we would often lose a second plane child.
Mm-hmm.
We can let them work in small groups as opposed to one-on-one. So think about the presentation, but looking at it, making it co-natural with the child's capacities and tendencies and so forth.
Yeah. Be less direct in your work prompts, right? So with a level 1 child, I'm going to say, now you might want to work with this material. But for a level 2 or level 3 child, I'd say,
how might you?
What would you like to do? Yeah.
How might you continue to think about this?
Right.
So do you agree? Is that how you see it?
No, I agree. I agree. I think that we are welcoming to children of all ages and to any level, wherever they're at. And, like you said, that half of bread is better than no bread. So we're going to take them when we can get them, and we're going to help them fall in love first. I think those are great tips for these catechists that are asking these questions.
And I can tell in both cases, just by the way the question was asked, that these children are going to be fine.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, great. Thanks, Anna. Thank you all for listening to this week's episode of the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast. Go check out our show notes for the link to submit a listener question, as well as links to listen to other episodes that we have had Cathy on as a guest. This podcast is sponsored by the United States Association of the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. We would like to thank all of our contributing members because you are making this podcast possible. If you would like to know more about the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, or if you would like to become a member, please go to cgsusa.org. Thank you all for listening. We will see you in 2 weeks. Go and fall more deeply in love with God.